Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 9th Inspire NT Science Outreach guest talk for our course. And today we have Rebecca Rogers, who is a PhD student here at Charles Lyell University, but also part of the committee for Science Week NT. And for the last 2 years, she has been responsible for the social media before, during, and after Science Week. So she's going to share a little bit of her experience and what she has learned with dealing with different platforms, and also a few tips on how to maximize your impact. So, Rebecca, it's all yours.
Okay, do I need to hold that one? Yeah, okay. Hold it close. I'm sure to move it away from my face constantly, so hopefully you'll all still be able to hear me. So also, excuse me reading my notes. I'm in the depths of a PhD and not much stays in my brain at the moment, so I will be reading off them a little bit. They're also slightly out of date, so it's fine. We'll make it work though. Okay, so like Carla said, today I'm going to be talking about, oh, sorry, I'll just move this. I didn't turn that off, did I? I think I did. No, I did. Okay, so this afternoon I'll be talking about using social media for science outreach. And although most of what I'll be talking about is kind of broad advice and tips, it's all very applicable specifically to science outreach, because that's where my experience comes from. And it's, as Carla already mentioned, I've had experience running social media accounts for Inspired NT. So that was the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for Inspired NT, and National Science Week, which was Twitter and Facebook. And also this year I was in charge of uploading and scheduling video content for Science Week, and that was through Facebook and YouTube. So I'll be drawing on some of my experience here, and also some of my more recent experience on Instagram with my dog, Hubie. So obviously, cutest dog on Instagram, I'm not biased at all. But I've actually been using her account, obviously just for the fun of it, but also I've been actually experimenting with what works and what doesn't on the platform. We only really used Instagram a little bit for Science Week last year, and we didn't really use it this year. So I've been trying to have a go and figuring it out a little bit more. So I'll be talking a little bit about QB throughout this talk as well. So first I'm going to be talking a bit about why I think it's worth using social media, and specifically for science outreach, but also in general. And then talk in more detail about being more strategic with your social media, followed by some of my kind of tips and the ways that I think you can improve engagement. And then finish off with a couple of bonus tools that I've used or have used in the past, currently use for creating content. So social media can get a little bit of a bad rap these days with influencers and cancel culture and all of these things. But love it or hate it, it's pretty well integrated into most of our daily lives at this point, and probably even more so at the moment with COVID-19. Everyone spends a lot of time on their phones, a lot of time on the computer. So if we can learn to take advantage of social media, we can greatly increase the reach and the impact of the science that we do. So I think though it's really important at the beginning of this talk to make the point that you don't need to use social media to be good at science outreach or to be a science communicator in general. You've heard plenty of talks already from other people showing how you can share your science or your research or be a good science communicator without getting on the internet, and especially not onto social media platforms. So depending on your particular audience or your personal goals as a communicator, you can definitely avoid social media entirely if you want to. Realistically though, you will reach significantly more people if you learn even just one form of social media, one platform, learn it really well. It's just a numbers game. There's billions of people actively using Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram every month. TikTok, it's a bit of an older stat here, but TikTok's not far behind. As long as it doesn't get banned in certain countries, it'll probably be up there pretty soon too. So obviously, I think it's worth investing in learning a little bit more about social media, whether you're sharing your own personal research, you're working for a scientific organization, or you're part of a community group. Whatever it is, it's worth investing a bit of time in. But if you've grown up with social media or you've spent a bit of time on the internet, you probably have heard the saying that the internet is forever, so it pays to be strategic. And so you need to have a plan and you need to stick to it. Especially if you're working with an organisation or a company, you really need to be careful about what you're saying online. So I'm going to go through a few of the things that I think are important when creating and implementing a social media strategy. Overall though, I think the key is to be intentional. So I'll go through each of these points individually and mention some of the tools that I currently use or have used in the past to kind of help with them. It's only just a jumping off point as far as the tools are concerned. There's thousands of different options out there. So they'll just give you an idea of what kind of things might be out there if you've never kind of delved into this world. So the first thing that I think is one of the most important is to know your audience. And by that, I don't just mean knowing who you're going to target, whether it's young people, people in Darwin or in the Northern Territory, as the case for our Science Week accounts. But once you have an idea of what that demographic is that you're trying to target, understanding what they are interested in, what are they engaging with, what are they commenting on, all of these things are really important for your own social media accounts. So you can either go and look at people's personal accounts that you might want to target, people who are already following you, or look at other organisations that are similar that you might want to emulate and have a look at what they're doing. That's pretty much what I've done for QB's account at different times. I've looked at other accounts that are similar to hers. What are they doing? What do I like? What do I not like? To get an idea of what kind of things I would want to share. But to be a little bit more efficient, there are plenty of tools out there, like this one, Hootsuite, which is what I used for Science Week last year. And it's just a way to really easily gather all this information. You can also use programs like Hootsuite to do analytics and to schedule posts and things like that. But for the purpose of this section, the way that I used it for Science Week was you can create all these different streams that you can see up here. So you can follow your own timeline, other people's timelines. You can also create lists. So for Science Week, I created a list that had CDU, Catherine Times, ABC Darwin, also all the other Science Week accounts from around the country. So I could see what they were posting. You can quickly reshare it, but you can also get that information about what kind of content others might be interested in. Try not to overlap or purposely kind of overlap with what they're doing, all of that. And you can also follow hashtags. So that one can be particularly useful. So for Science Week, I was following hashtag Science Week and hashtag Science Week NT, meant that I could see when other people were posting content that might be relevant to me and our audience. Yeah. So it's a good way to create that real-time information about what your audience is interested in. So once you've got all that information, you can start looking at things like brand voice. So all the best social media accounts out there, the ones that you hear about all the time, they all have a really unique voice or brand identity. And if you can nail this and everything that you post fits within your brand voice, you seem more authentic, which is always good. And it's a word that's thrown out with social media all the time. But it also means that you're less likely to post something that your audience wouldn't want to see, either that's controversial or just something that they're not interested in, and you lose your audience. So you can find a lot of resources online that can help you figure out what kind of brand voice you might want to have, whether it's for a personal account or an organization. Things like looking for adjectives to describe your organization. Is it quirky? Is it informative? Whatever it is. It's kind of beyond my expertise, but I thought I'd just share some examples so you can get an idea of what I mean. So the first two we have here are Dove and SpaceX. Pretty different audiences that they're targeting, although there'll definitely be some overlap there. But Dove's brand voice is pretty distinctive. It's all about empowerment, encouragement, particularly around for women. They use language, I've cut it off a bit, but language like make our world better, all that kind of language comes out in their posts. At the moment, they're posting a lot of Black Lives Matter content, which for some accounts would really not fit in with their brand voice. They put that on there and they would lose their customers very quickly or their target audience, but it works really well for Dove. And you can see often their content is very much around women empowerment, which is what that post up there is showing. And on the other side, we have SpaceX, and they're an aerospace manufacturer. Probably can't read the caption there, but pretty much most of their content, they really lean into the geeky space content. Their captions are very informative, they're very matter of fact, but it's very shareable content for anyone who's interested in space-related things, drones, all of this. So although technically their actual consumers would be a pretty small number of people, they kind of cast a big net with the type of content they put out so that eventually it's going to end up in front of their customers. The last example I'm going to talk about is pretty different to the last two, and it's for this game here called Fall Guys. It's a new game at the moment. It's pretty popular. It's a little bit ridiculous. It's based on those kind of Japanese game shows, and it's 40-odd bean-shaped characters get dropped in a map, online multiplayer. They have to kind of compete in obstacle courses and things like that. It's pretty weird, but I think it's a really good example of a company or a group that have nailed their brand voice, and their social media manager is very clever. So their Twitter account is very much focused on being weird, funny, and filled with internet meme culture. Their audience is young kids, but also millennials, people who have grown up on the internet. So the first post up here, is apparently their second most liked post. So I'll give you a moment to read it if you can read it up there, but mostly it's probably about the picture. It's weird, it's kind of ridiculous, but it really clearly fits with their target audience, which is younger people, something a bit weird and shareable. It's ridiculous. For whatever reason, it got a huge amount of engagement. It fits their audience though. But probably a bit more of an obvious one to me is this other example, which is really clever, and it really speaks to knowing the audience well. So if you have no idea what this meme is talking about, probably a good chance you're not their target audience. So don't feel bad if you have no idea what it's about, but pretty much it's a crossover with another game that's really popular at the moment. Again, it's a random, ridiculous looking post, but they use internet language that people would understand who are in their target audience. It's like they're having a conversation with their friends. It works really well for their brand. So obviously SpaceX is somewhat sciencey related. This one's not so much, but it's an idea of having a really clear brand voice, gets a huge amount of shares, a huge amount of likes, gets in front of people. So moving on from brand voice, this is a bit of a quick one, but it's primarily really just about it being efficient, which is always good, especially with social media, because more importantly probably though is because consistent posting is really critical for making the most of algorithms. If you want your content to end up in front of people, you need to post consistently. And that could be every day, it could be every week, it could be every month. It doesn't really matter as long as you're consistent with what you're doing. So scheduling posts just means you don't have to spend as much time sitting in front of the computer, or you can do it in bursts. And for me, this was a really big part of my role for Science Week, was in the month leading up to Science Week. This year, last year was the same, scheduling a huge amount of content. So we had stuff coming out regularly. We didn't have to do a lot on the actual days, except for engaging with people or sharing more timely information or more interesting stuff that was going on day to day. So on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you can schedule things pretty easily with their inbuilt systems. You can actually use Facebook Creator Studio for Instagram now too, since they own Instagram. And you can use Hootsuite, like I mentioned before, to schedule posts as well, especially if you've got lots of accounts, you're working for an organization, that can be really useful. For Instagram, although you can technically do it through Facebook Creator Studio, I use an app called Later. It's one that I've had to play around with. You can upload all your content, you can schedule posts for each day or for whatever it is that you're doing, and they automatically go up. You can add things like the first comment automatically, which is where for me I would put hashtags, and you can tag locations, things like that. Instagram can be a little bit more tricky than the other ones, but it's a great way to get content out much more easily. And like a true scientist, I love some data, and I could spend a lot of my time sitting looking at Facebook Insights and Instagram Insights. I won't go into too much detail here, especially since you probably can't read it that well. But really, I just wanted to make people aware, if they're not already, that most pages and accounts, especially if they're set up as an organization or a business, will have this kind of information. So you can look at things like the total page views, how many unique users you've reached, how many likes you've got, how much engagement. For Science Week, this is the Science Week account for the last month. A lot of reds there, but that's just because Science Week, we don't use that account as much once Science Week's over, so we'd expect that. The figure down the bottom here is the month of Science Week this year. So I've just exported the data and looked specifically at Science Week. So we can see that during Science Week, we get these peaks in our unique number of people that we've reached. And it's somewhere in the 4,000 to 6,000 each day. And this kind of data is really important if you're working for an organization like Inspired NT, where we have to report on this kind of stuff. Yeah, so it's really easy to get to. There's a big export button. I can show you where to find that, Carla. And you can download a huge amount of data about what is going on, especially on Facebook. There's a lot of data that you can get. And when I was doing the report for Inspired NT at the end of the year, when I was working for them, I downloaded a lot of this data, and we could show how much money we put into ads and things like that, and exactly what kind of output we got from it, what posts work, what didn't. On Facebook especially, you can also follow other accounts. So we follow all the other Science Week's accounts. It can be dangerous comparing yourself to others, but it's also useful information. I know Carla liked this section during Science Week.
Found out that people were very competitive. How are we looking at that?
Yeah, yeah, I put those in there. Couldn't help myself. Always say don't compare yourself with others, but it's interesting and it's helpful sometimes. And you can also look at individual posts, how they've been tracking, how well they've gone, what's worked and what hasn't. On the other side, it's Instagram. So this is one of the more simple metrics from Instagram, but it's just for the last year for QB, which posts have got the most likes. So it's a quick way to have a look and see what kind of stuff people are enjoying, what content they like. For QB, it's clearly light, bright pictures, usually stuff where she's looking a bit goofy, or puppy content always works really well. There's also a couple of the top most liked ones were things that I shared ideas that people could use, but I'll talk about them a little bit later. But essentially, all this kind of data is really important for improving your social media strategies and really key when you have to actually report to someone about it. Did someone ask something? Is that why that popped up?
Yeah, I was just replying.
Okay, cool.
Saying the target audience checking in.
Cool. Okay, so now if you remember nothing else from this talk, I think with social media, it's important to remember that an engaged following is more important than a big following. And this is probably an important one for Science Week, where we clearly in the NT are going to always have a smaller following than other accounts. But we had really high engagement, especially this year with all the video content. So it's really good to remember numbers aren't everything, but if you're going to look at any numbers, look at engagement, not the size of your account. Because at the end of the day, for Instagram, YouTube, pretty much every social media platform, they're built on algorithms. And if people aren't engaging with your content in your account, they just won't see what you're putting up there. It won't be put in front of them. They won't see it. And sometimes with Instagram, for example, I've had people say that no matter what, they're following my account, they're liking posts, they're commenting even sometimes, they're still not having it show up in their feed. You really sometimes have to work quite hard to get in front of people's faces with those algorithms. So whether you're speaking to a small community group or you're trying to reach a broad audience, it's really important that people are liking what you're doing, that they're commenting, sharing, all of those things. So there are plenty of different ways you can increase engagement. And I'm just going to talk about a few of my favorites, or the ones that I use a lot or have seen online a lot. Okay, so first up is adding value. So social media is an exchange. It should always be a conversation. It's not a public notice board. There are exceptions to this. You'll see things like BOM maybe, or other government organizations that do kind of use social media as a public notice board, and they can get away with that because that's what they're there for. People are going to engage with them no matter what. They need to get that information. But for the most part, most accounts, you need to create relationships. You need to build those relationships. You need to add value. So you need to, it's important to know what value you're adding to your followers' lives. Why should they keep coming back? Why should they engage with you? Why should they interact? So for science outreach, you're probably sharing knowledge of some form. So the value that you're adding, that part of the equation might actually not be too complicated. But I think it's also important to consider how you're packaging that information. So these are some examples from QB's account. They're some of those higher engagement posts, and they were ideas for enriching your dog's lives through food or mental stimulation. One of them was essentially apple bobbing, and the other one was a food way of feeding without a bowl. So I added ingredients lists, videos. For the first one, I also had some pictures of the process that I used to make it. I added value. It was something that people could share. A lot of people saved them so they could come back to them later, and I got a lot more engagement. So another thing you'll often hear is about including a call to action on all or at least most of your posts to encourage engagement. Pretty much it's spelling out to your audience, I want you to engage, and telling them exactly how you want them to do it. So it could be as simple as saying, like this post if you like puppies. You'll probably get a few extra likes, but realistically, most people who like it were going to like it anyway. So you probably want to be a bit more explicit. I think a great example is the satellite selfie campaign from this year's Science Week. So people were asked to create giant artwork. It would be photos of it would be taken from outer space. People were sharing their progress photos. Carla's now sharing the final pictures online of a lot of these. It made people feel like they were part of a community, part of our community, created conversations. It got a lot of engagement. And randomly back to Fall Guys for a moment, another great example of a call to action. So this one was actually a follow-up to that kind of weird X-ray post from before, the one that they got a lot of engagement on. And this one they asked people to answer a poll. It was nothing too exciting, but it got a lot of engagement from what was already a really high engagement post. So you probably can't see from the back there, but they got about 416,000 votes on this post. So almost 500,000 people engaged with this post just because they asked them to do something, and it was a clever follow-up from a previous post. So ask people to do things, you're more likely to get engagement. Next one's a bit more of a practical one, hashtags. They can feel a little cringy at times, but at the end of the day, they work. They increase reach dramatically when they're used well. It's something you kind of just need to experiment with and see what's going to work for you and your audience. And depending on your audience, hashtags may not always be as important, or more specific hashtags are probably important. But as a general rule, use lots of them. On Instagram, you can use quite a lot. Twitter, you're limited by characters, so you probably want to be a bit more strategic with which ones you use. Use a variety of different sized hashtags. And by that, I mean, if you use hashtag science, for example, it's probably going to get flooded with content, that hashtag, and it's really not going to do anything much for you. Probably not worth using it. Hashtag dog, for example. There's no point in me putting that in there. No one's ever going to see that. It's changing every second. But on the other side of that, something like hashtag Science Week NT might not get a huge reach, but it's really specific to our audience. It's a branded hashtag, essentially. It means that people, when they're looking for that hashtag, they know exactly what they're going to find, and we can actually use it as well to gather information. Hashtag satellite selfie is probably another good example of that, where people could go on there, they could get ideas, they could see the things coming through that they had watched people building. So it's quite clever to use branded hashtags sometimes. Also, in some cases, I'd say hashtags are not going to be as useful other than maybe those branded ones. For example, like a community group. You're not going to put 30 hashtags on a community group page post because you've got a really specific audience anyway. If anything, it could probably look a little unauthentic and make you look like you're trying to go outside of the group that you have always said that you're working with. So there's no point in putting them all on there. But using a really specific targeted one or a location, something like that might work better. So the example I have up here again from QB, this is the post of mine, or of hers, I should say, that got the most reach. Wasn't one of her better posts, didn't get a huge amount of engagement, but the reason why it got so much reach is because I used hashtags like Kmart styling and home decor ideas. They're the kind of hashtags that people are looking for, and they're probably also following. So although it's not a post that her normal audience engaged with a lot, it was a good way of finding new people that might cross over between wanting to style things, but also, and cheap hacks, but also like cute puppy dogs. I know I'm one of those people. So just a little bit of a video break, really. Pretty much, I know you were talking about video today anyway, I think, but video is king, especially short, snappy videos. TikTok's success is a prime example of this. And the fact that Instagram pretty much copied TikTok with their new Reels feature, which is what this was from, is a good sign that short, snappy videos, they catch people's attention, they work. The next one I'm going to show, which we'll see if it has sound, but it's also actually from TikTok, and it's someone essentially doing, if you've heard of 3-minute thesis, essentially doing 3-minute thesis on TikTok, or an elevator pitch of their research. I would say though that I think she probably used a little bit too much jargon, but I'm not sure exactly what her audience was.
So some of you have been asking what my research is about, so I'm going to tell you. So actually, trillions of bacteria live in your gut, and in fact, there are actually more bacterial cells in your body than human cells. And if we zoom in here on the epithelial bilayer, which is the layer of cells that separates the outside of your intestines from the inside where the bacteria live, you can see that your gut bacteria can actually make a bunch of molecules that have an effect on the human body. And bacteria can make these molecules from a number of things. 1, they can synthesize them on their own. 2, they can interact with molecules that you absorb through your diet. 3, they can interact with drugs that you take that enter your gut. And 4, they can interact with molecules that you make on your own. So broadly, what I am studying is part 4 of that section, which is how molecules made by the host, which is humans, can be metabolized by the bacteria that live in our gut, and how those metabolites affect us back in the end.
So yeah, pretty simple, straightforward, wouldn't have taken her a lot of effort or time, but it's very shareable, very easy to create. And TikTok is just going off. And there's a lot of science content on TikTok as well. So the final one that I'm going to talk about in this section is to do something unexpected. So doing something weird, or do something weird, and people will comment on it. They can't help themselves, and suddenly your engagement will go way up. So the next video, which I think is a TikTok video as well, is pretty much an ad, but you'll see what I mean about doing something unexpected.
Real quick, I wanted to share with you something exciting that is happening on Monday that I'm doing to promote my new Netflix show, Emily's Wonderlab. I'm going to be on The Today Show with Hoda and Jenna, and we're going to talk about Emily's Wonderlab and do science experiments. It's all going to happen around 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, so please, please, please make sure you watch The Today Show on Monday.
So it was completely random. She pulled a planet out of the fridge, put it in the microwave, pulled it out of the microwave. It changed each time. She's doing space content, so it was still relevant to her content, but it's completely random, and the comments were filled with people asking, what are you doing? Why did you just get that from the fridge? Did that just change? Is that a different planet? I don't know. They were all talking in the comments. And even though this was just an ad for her going on the Today Show, when I looked up, I think it was #SciComm, trying to find some videos, it was one of the ones that came up. Normally, if she stood in front of a camera and just told people, come watch my show, it would never have ended up there. So it's very clever. Do something weird, put something in the background, whatever it is. If you want to get engagement, doing something unexpected is always going to work. Well, most of the time. So to finish off, I'm just going to talk about a couple of tools that I like to use or that I've used in the past. So really it's more if people are interested or they want to come back to it, they can come and have a look. So there's going to be a bunch of apps on the phone screen there. It's just a screen capture from my phone showing some of the apps that I personally have used in the past, or I've seen other people use. So for me, Lightroom is a prime one that I use for photo editing. Hootsuite and Later I've already talked about. And the last one is Canva. So Canva I used a lot during Science Week last year to make images to put on Twitter and on Instagram, to make giveaway posts. And actually this whole presentation was also made using templates that are on Canva and imagery from Canva. If you have money to pay, if you're working for an organization or something and they can pay for a subscription, you get a huge amount of content. But if not, there's still a lot of free content too.
That's good because we did talk about Canva the last
Oh, okay. Yeah.
about the caption defaults.
Yeah.
And then and now sometimes you don't need to buy the Pro. Sometimes you
No.
pay $1 here and there.
Yeah, well, this one, for example, some of the images were from the Pro one and I just got the trial just so I could download this for today, just for that, and then I'll cancel it and that's fine. things like this I think are really cool, that this was an iPhone screen and you drag whatever photo you want on top of it and it clips it into that so that it looks like it's actually in the screen. You don't actually have to be able to do any sort of editing to get it to work. They're really cool little templates that you can get in there, and lots of really cool imagery. Technically, this one here was also made on one of the apps on Patinator, randomly tried it out. But pretty much that's it.
Thank you. That was very useful, Rebecca. I learned a couple of tricks, one or two here today. I think, yeah, let me just go back to the, so if you are watching this online, you can post the questions on the chat. We'll keep an eye on the chat here. But is anybody here on the audience here at CDU that would like to ask a question?
You're welcome to.
Yeah. What was your dog's name again? Sorry.
QB.
QB?
QB, like the letter Q and B.
Okay. Just wondering, how many followers did you have at the start of that Instagram account, and then what are you currently on now?
So we got her in.
You can transfer here.
Oh yeah, sorry. When did I get her? She's 6 months old now, so about 4 months ago, and she's got about 700 followers. Yeah.
And then after that, progressively, did you have posts where that kind of jumped up a lot, or was it just progressively?
Yeah, so I'd say the ones where for her account, where it would jump up the most would be things like tagging other accounts, bigger accounts, and them sharing her content. So they're doing things like, there was one random post that I used, put a like thing around her neck. It was from, if you've heard of Go-To Skincare, it was from there. Something that they had sent, like it wasn't a scrunchie, it was like for holding your hair back. And I put it around her neck and did a photo of her with that, and they shared that, and all of a sudden I definitely got a bunch of people following her from that. Yeah, probably the biggest jumps were tagging other people, or occasionally things like that came up. I would have got a little bit of a boost there, but the best ones are from probably sharing other people sharing her content. For her, because we're in Darwin and she's kind of a unique dog for Darwin, being a kind of snow dog type dog, a lot of them are also, I focus on local accounts. So have tagging, there's like Top End Sunsets and NT based accounts that I would tag, or use their hashtags as well and get featured on different pages. So that a lot of that stuff kind of, and it's why I didn't go into too much detail on those kind of things. It does depend a lot on what you're doing, and I figured there's probably a broad range of people who, what they're interested in, what they will be doing, or not even going to do it, just interested in hearing about it. So yeah, the more specific what will work for different accounts varies a lot.
And I think sometimes it's a matter, if you have something like Inspire NT, where we have Science Week NT and Inspire NT Facebook page, two of them, it's sharing between them, and finding those organizations that you really want to keep touch with. So they start seeing that you're sharing their content all the time. They kind of get very happy. They start following you, and they might start sharing your content. So it becomes like, it's not just about you hoping that, you know, everybody will start liking you, especially on Twitter too. It's like, you need to, it's a two-way.
Build those relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah, and building relationships with other big accounts is definitely useful. Ones that are similar size to you especially, but also ones that are much bigger than yours. So like you say, for Science Week, there's a lot of accounts that are clearly also engaged and are willing to engage with those accounts. And so if you work with them, it's better for everybody. It doesn't need to be a competition.
A good example is just there on the screen is City of Darwin Libraries. Like they have a big footprint on Darwin overall. Like a lot of people follow, parents always following them to see what's happening there. So if we're having a good relationship with them and sharing their content, and when there is something relevant, we can do activities together, that really helps, because every time I did something with them, the turtle, there was the turtle, tropical, was it turtle and tea? It was a bit, I forgot the name, but when we did that with them, there was a bit of a peak of people starting following us on Inspire NT. So it does work if you have started your network. Territorial Turtle Tales, thank you, Tom.
Yeah, and the other one with that, with spikes of engagement or following for QB, would probably be things like competitions. So one of Aussie Pooch and Darwin, who the dog food and what do you call themselves, NT Pet Health business, they actually asked me if I would do a competition with them, giving away some long leads. And obviously you get a big spike there because people usually have to like and follow your account and things like that. You will tend to get a dip again afterwards with people unfollowing after the competition's over. I know I do it sometimes too, but you do, if your content is good, you'll keep people. If it's not, and you're not adding value, you will lose them again, of course. So there is a balance to be made there, but as long as you're constantly putting out good content, it's all within the same kind of vein, you'll keep them. Also with that competition, I tried to be strategic about how I did it, that when I asked them to, I think I asked them to say where would they go and walk for a walk with their dog or whatever, and to tag another Darwin dog, or no, it didn't have to be Darwin with that one, just another dog account or someone with a dog that would go with them. And I gave away a second one for the person who they tagged, because normally you ask people to tag a friend and it's kind of annoying and no one really wants to do it. So I was like, okay, so if they're going to tag someone, that person's also going to get something. And all of a sudden people are more willing to tag all of their friends. So really thinking about what you're going to do and how you're actually adding value with each of these things. Why should they bother? Is it worth it? Or otherwise they'll also just tag their own friend, like their burn accounts or whatever, or their friends and family who don't necessarily have a dog, in which case they're not my audience. I don't really need them to see this. It's no point. So I wanted them to tag people that actually have a dog. They're more likely to want to engage.
Thank you, Rebecca. And yeah, and I think it has been working. We have increased our numbers every year. I think in Science Week reached the benchmark that we're hoping go over 1,000 people following. And again, it's ANT. So I thought that's a pretty good number, and we keep increasing it. Inspire NT has around 700 to 800 followers. I can't remember right now, but it has been increasing. It's about, and I think a good one that I really like is at the moment is the ABC Darwin. They keep putting questions that are very, you can't, it's good.
Really clever with their social media too. And they're really good at targeting their audience. And like you say, with those Instagram, and I think they've done it on Facebook as well, sharing questions of what makes you a Territorian, I think it was. I answered a couple of them too, and I had to search up some things, and then they shared answers to them. Really clever way to get people engaged. Obviously it's working. Both of us noticed it.
It's almost like you have to stop yourself from answering it.
That is the other thing I see a lot of social media professionals talking about, is turning off your phone or having very set times that you are on social media. With things like Instagram, you don't want to, as I'll say, post and ghost. You want to post and then engage with lots of people. But on the other side, people will say, for TikTok, post and ghost. Post it and get off the app as soon as you can, because otherwise you'll be on there for hours. So post and ghost on TikTok, don't do it on Instagram, but still schedule your time, get off.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, I learned the last 6 months is exactly that. Just like be strategic, think about how long it's going to take your time. So for example, you're posting on Twitter, they have a assignment they need to post on Twitter and they need to post on Facebook. Think about how you can use that post to engage with other people. You see? Think about how are you going to put a question there that people will be willing to answer? Are you going to put a really cool photo there? People will be very curious to go to your blog. So think how you can make that post that, of course, the initial people that are going to see are the people who are our audience. And also, like I said, send it to as many people, and not like tell as many people that you know about that post so they can have a look and share it too. But if you put something there that the other 700 people who are already following Inspire NT will be interested, chances that they were going to forward that and then other people watch it, it's much higher. We had that with the videos. Some of the videos just went completely crazy. And I think it's a mix of interesting content, good way that it was posted on Facebook, and a big network of families and friends.
And doing it immediately, I think, as well, especially for like TikTok, obviously that was the exception, but for the rest of them, the moment you post, you want to get that engagement straight away, and that's how it's going to get shared around. Otherwise, it'll get lost in the sea of everything else.
And, what about timing? Like obviously, there's better times to post.
Yeah, and times to post can be a bit of a complicated thing, and some of it's a bit about experimenting, but you can look up online ideal times to engage. On Later, it shows you a bit more detailed breakdown of when is best to post. I think I only actually noticed it the other day, but I think for QB it was like 6 p.m. on a Monday night. For whatever reason, that's when my followers are most active. Slightly different to what it says on Instagram, which tends to not have as detailed information. But yeah, if you look up online, there's specific ones for different types of content and different places. You've got to consider time zones as well to some extent, depending on your target. On Later, it does, if once you've gathered enough information, I think it is, once you've used it for a while. But if you just Google times to post, there's lots of different information online, but it really comes down to experimenting. But there are a few key kind of times that are recommended.
Yeah, and we based that on Science Week this week, the best times.
Yeah, oh yeah, so for the Science Week videos, I tried to go by those times that it said online. It's all a bit of a guessing game until you've been putting out a lot of content, but there are some general rules. Okay.
Yeah, and I think in case of our activity, we will choose those times that we already know. Yeah. Well, I think unless there is a question from you can actually turn your mic on and ask a question if you want online. But if there is no more questions, I would like to thank Rebecca for coming here today and talk about something that it's going to be almost like mandatory, I think, in a few years as a scientist, how to learn to do social media. We can't really escape from it. We try. But it doesn't really work. Okay, thank you very much, Rebecca, and thank you, everybody. And this will be available online in a few weeks' time. Thank you. Bye.
You can try.